Hello and welcome to another episode of the Happy Head podcast. I'm your host, as hopefully you know by now. My name is Paul, and today I have Lindsey Wander from Worldwide Tutoring. Good morning where you are, Lindsey. How are you?
Great. How are you?
I am very well. It's kind of the end of the day for me, so I'm looking forward to a little bit of chilling out and relaxing. I think I've got one more thing to do and then I'm done. But you're starting your day.
Yeah, here in Chicago, just starting the day, but still, it's, end of the week, so there's still a reason to celebrate.
Okay. So what's going on in Chicago? I'm guessing it's winter and snow and all that kind of stuff over there?
Well, when I leave my bunker, which I rarely do these days, yes, there is snow outside, but the snow is not so bad because this is the first place I've lived where they've said things like it's too cold to snow. So actually, when it's snowing, it's not that cold outside. So I don't mind it.
Now, where I am, I'm in kind of like the bottom right-hand corner of the UK, and most of the UK north of me has had snow. We've had a tiny little bit of sleet a few days ago, but that's it. So there's all these idyllic pictures of, sort of, they call them Narnia land. And, it's like beautiful and kids sledging, doing all that kind of stuff. And here we are just with rain and cold and just cloud. So it's bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, I have a friend who's in San Diego. She got hail the other day. So I don't know what's going on.
So listen, what's your story, Lindsey? Why are we chatting today? Tell me about you.
Wow, that's a big question. So one of the things that I think I connected with your podcast was the idea of, mindset. And that's really something that I implement in my daily life and my career, but I also really seek to teach that to our students as well. Because a lot of the way we live our lives and the way that we carry out certain things is about our perception, and really shifting that mindset is key. And so that's, I think, why I'm here today is to share that message.
Now, you were obviously Worldwide Tutoring, you're a teacher. And would I be right in saying that the last year and couple of months have been a bit manic for you?
It's been a really wild ride, but so is entrepreneurship, really. And honestly, so is being an educator. And part of why I chose this route, no 2 days are the same, no 2 hours are the same. And it's fun to be on my toes a little bit and to have to be put in situations where I'm constantly learning and constantly innovating and, constantly adjusting, which is really motivating and keeps things really fresh. But yes, 2020 with the pandemic, all the school closures, there was definitely a spotlight shining on education and also the mental health component that goes with a lot of what we were dealing with, which are two big areas that I really focus on in my tutoring business. And really, as a result, required me to figure out what did people need and how can I provide that to them at this time. And it's been really fun to be creative and to come up with these solutions to help other people.
What would you say has been the biggest challenge? I mean, obviously, apart from the workload and the additional hours that you personally have had to put in, what's kind of been the biggest challenge for you with tutoring over the last year or so?
The uncertainty has been hard for the families and therefore for us. When the schools first shut down, it was, it's just going to be a couple weeks. My background is biochem, and I'm like, yeah, no, this is going to be the rest of the school year at least. But, everyone was thinking it was just a couple weeks, and then that extended. In the summer, they're thinking they're going to open again in the fall. Then the fall, some opened, some didn't. There's also a lot of uncertainty, in terms of social issues and politics combined with everything going on with the pandemic. And that's just made things really hard for our clients to decide what they needed and what they wanted, and really made impacted our business. So for the first half of 2020, honestly, through about September was really scary. And it was tough to not only, on my end, wondering, is my business going to survive as I'm seeing other tutoring companies around me shut their doors? But it was also hard thinking about the tutors who rely on this not just for income, but also their kind of outlet and their happy place. And not being able to provide that to them was really hard as well. And so not only could I not help the students, but not being able to help the tutors really put me in a position of figure it out, put your head down and figure out a way, because if education's going to change, now is the time. And so let's get on the front end of this. And I'm really glad I did, because we're doing really well now. October, November, December into January have been awesome. And it's been great, not only in terms of finances, but also getting feedback from the tutors and the families and the students that everyone's just really finally, for the first time in almost a year, feeling calm again and less uncertain. And that's just a really good feeling that I can bring that to them.
I imagine for the students themselves, it's been a really painful year, because generally around exam time, you've got the kind of standard anxiety and exam nerves and have I revised enough? Have I covered all the right subjects and all that kind of thing? But on top of that, particularly last year, there's will my exam go ahead?
Right.
Or will it be cancelled, or will it be delayed? And have I revised at the right time? How has that affected the work that you do with your students?
This is something in the world of education that we're constantly faced with. There's always new ideas of education, new policies being implemented, and changes in those standardized tests are constant. So again, I'm always on my toes with that and prepared for it. The thing that was hard and new with the pandemic was we would have kids prepare, and then a week before the test, it would get canceled. And that was really hard because they just want to be done with it. They've done their due diligence, and it was like they don't get that, cross the finish line moment, and it's tough. What I did in a lot of cases is I told them, you know what, let's let it go. Let's focus on other things. There's some students that decided to go to other states or other cities for their testing, because here in Chicago was more likely for tests to be canceled because it is more of a hot spot than maybe some of the suburbs or neighboring states. So, we kind of just adjusted it per student and what their personal goals were and what was going on in their life. And that's really what we do anyway as educators, is really make things personalized. So, it wasn't anything new in terms of the process, but it was hard to see these kids with, again, dealing with that uncertainty. Even our kids who had already gone through the testing process, who are now starting their first year of college, not really knowing what that was going to be like. The kids who are starting their first year of high school. So, there's just a lot of things that are going on that are not normal. And, I'm in a position too where normally I could give really good advice and I can tell you, here's what you need to do, here's what you need to do. And even I'm like, I have no idea. Let's just, try this and make it work. Everyone in the world is in the same position. Let's just figure it out and do the best we can.
I think it's going to be interesting looking down the line 3, 4, 5, 10 years on the impact on youngsters that this year has on them over time, because some people have kind of like done their best and gone with the flow. Others, like you say, have said, no, that's it, time out. It's going to be interesting because the job market's changing, life is changing. People are working remotely, working from home. A lot of people have been laid off, have had to pivot, which has kind of been like the word of 2020. So I think educationally, as in like kids leaving school and college and moving out into the world, I think there's going to be a big challenge for them whenever it is in the next 3, 4, 5 years that they come out of the educational system and get out into the big wide world. I wonder if there's going to be kind of any leeway given to those kids.
It's funny because I actually kind of feel the opposite. I feel like they're going to be better prepared for the world. And my reason is this past year, I think, has been a global exercise in resiliency. And learning coping skills and learning, emotional self-regulation, because we didn't really have anything else. And we really had to go to our resources that were at hand. and be vulnerable. And since everyone was in the same position, it kind of made that easier to say, look, I'm having a hard time. I feel like the students that I've talked to have really found some positives in this. For example, I've talked to some of my high school kids, and we do check-ins all the time, and they've said it's kind of been nice to not have the noise of the crowd and the peer pressure, because they've been able to really focus on who are they, what are they interested in, what is their voice, what is their passions, and really been able to deep dive into that, which has been something that has proven to be really interesting, because they've gone into things that I don't think they otherwise would have. Also, I've had students tell me that they like that they are kind of in a position where they have to figure things out. They can't just, I've had one student say to me, I can't just raise my hand and ask and get the answer. I have to figure it out. And they like it. And so there's certain skills that I think that they're learning that are actually better preparing them for what I think our future will be, which is going to be this hybrid remote workforce, really. I think that everyone talks about going back to normal. I don't know if 2019 is ever going to be revisited. And I think that our kids are going to be very well prepared for, at the very least, being able to embrace change and go with it, which is really something that is hard to teach. And we don't often give them a lot of opportunities to learn that. And I'm personally excited to see what's going to happen next year, the year after, 10 years from now. The areas where I am concerned are more the content mastery, because in a lot of cases, especially for students who don't have reliable access to internet, or maybe the teachers weren't as proficient with the online learning, there's definitely going to be some gaps in terms of like their math, their language arts, things like that. And while many kids, I think, will be able to catch up, there's some students with learning difficulties, there's some students with other concerns that it will make that a little more challenging. And that is concerning to me. But I do think as educators, that's an opportunity for us to readjust how are we teaching and find more efficient ways to do it. And that in itself is exciting also, because it's about dang time. We really need to, I always say, reimagine the educational system. It's needed a revamp for a while.
I think one group of people that have really suffered the most are parents, particularly parents
Agreed.
who've got children of different school ages and maybe don't have more than one computer or one laptop amongst them. That must be a hell of a challenge.
It is.
Because apparently kids have all got to start at the same time and finish at the same time. And so how on earth do you organize sharing a computer? What on earth do they do? It's I've talked to a lot of parents, and some of them are literally pulling their hair out because they're parents. They may be entrepreneurs, or they may be working 9 to 5. They're working remotely. Their life has turned upside down. But now on top of that, they've got to become teachers and technical experts and everything else as well. It must be nightmarish.
It is, and that's actually what I was going to say is I think our kids are faring better than the parents. The parents have a lot of pressure on them, not just about the schooling, but maintaining the home, maintaining their job, keeping things healthy, not only physically, but mental health. There's a lot of moving parts that are now all taking place at home. So that work-life balance is definitely thrown off, which has made things really hard as well. And then the simple logistical things like access to technology, space, time, those things are really very real challenges. And when I have parents talk to me about those issues, the first thing I always do is just reassure them that, yes, it's hard, and yes, you're not alone. So I even just funnily enough had a conversation with my Uber driver the other day who has a kid in high school, one in elementary, and then a 6-month-old. And just chatting with them as I was getting out of the car, he goes, so I'm not alone. And I was like, no. He's like, I'm not the only one. I'm like, no, you're not. You're doing a good job. It's going to be okay. And he was just like, okay. So even just that knowledge, I think definitely takes a little bit of the weight off. Like, we're all going through this. It's gonna work itself out. But another bit of advice that I often give to parents, and I do think this is really good for kids, back off a little bit, let the kids be bored, let them figure it out, let them fail a little bit, let them struggle. These are all things that don't typically happen inside the classroom because we do have things so adult-centered that it is kind of a unique opportunity that these kids are gaining the ability to have to figure things out on their own again. And those really teach a lot of valuable skills. I couldn't even list all of them. So one of the things I always say to parents is just back up a little bit. And that's hard. Trust me, as an educator, that's hard too. But it really is nice for the parents to take a little weight off and also for the kids to be able to have the opportunity to learn some valuable skills.
I actually think that's probably one of the biggest challenges for parents is to actually back off because they've been told that they have to do this. And a lot of parents are kind of take that to heart and think, oh my God, I've missed a couple of sessions here and I missed a couple of sessions there. I think over time, because this is not going to finish tomorrow, I think over time, parents will gradually understand that, yeah, I can't do it all. I'm a parent, I'm not a teacher, and that, yeah, I'm going to back off. And as you said earlier, I think that the kids will kind of step in and almost kind of take over their own self-education to a certain extent.
And, and I'm saying this very generally, there's obviously certain children that have, again, learning difficulties or certain cases where there's a lot of habits that need to be broken. But for the most part, I do really, encourage parents to reflect on how can I take stuff off my plate and put it on theirs. Even simple things like chores in the house. You have kids and you're overwhelmed with the maintenance of the house. Put them to work, like buy an adjustable broom so they can sweep. Have them each cook a meal, for dinner once a week. There's, again, value in that for both sides. So, as much as you can reflect and think, what can I give to them? That's really good for everyone.
I actually think there's one group of parents that are probably thriving right now, and those are the ones that chose, for whatever reason, to take their kids out of standard education and homeschool them full time, way before the pandemic was even a thought. And I think they are probably thriving in this environment because for them it's kind of not normal because obviously things are different, but as close to normal as it could ever be for them.
True, although, I do have a lot of homeschooling parents I interact with, and while it's homeschooling, there's very little time that they're actually spending at home. The way that it usually operates is, one parent might be really good at math, another might be really good at science, and they kind of send them to different groups. So they have their own little network, not to mention all the social activities, museums, sports, all of that, which has shut down. So even they're having a hard time because the basis of their homeschooling, which is the community, essentially, has kind of been shut down. So while they are maybe better positioned in terms of curriculum, there's still that social aspect that's been hard.
Yeah, I hadn't really considered that because it's funny you mention it. I was talking to someone a few months ago about homeschooling, and she was telling me about the group or the community sort of taking charge of different areas of it. And she was telling me about like the science trips out to the local pond and to the farms and all that kind of stuff has halted. So again, yeah, you're right. Everybody that's a parent with children of school age has some kind of challenge to face with this whole new world of home education, shall we say.
And the way that I look at it, again, as a scientist and an entrepreneur, is that those challenges provide us an opportunity for growth. Because when we face challenges, we start to innovate and we start to come up with new solutions. And not only does that allow us to grow in our ideas and our experiences, but our mindset changes because we now know that the next time we face a challenge, we can get through that as well. So even though, I'm not minimizing any of this that's going on, it's definitely been hard. There's a really cool aspect that I'm, again, looking forward to seeing of the resiliency that we're building and the innovations that have come out of this, and the creativity and the pride and the confidence and, you know, the self-esteem. All of this stuff is, you know, really, really interesting to see. And I look forward to how it's going to project later on.
How do you see, how can I put the industry tutoring globally? How do you see that changing as a result of what's happened over the past year or so?
To be honest, I think the whole education system, if we do this right, is going to alter tremendously. This idea of being able to get on a computer and access education from anywhere is powerful, because you're no longer limited to your zip code. And it's already been touched on a little bit, where we have, like, you know, some college professors are delivering their lectures online and you can come into the lecture and listen to it no matter where you are. I think it's going to be expanded even further. Just looking at what's been happening in the sports world and how they've been able to give that experience of, like, kind of being in a room at a massive scale, even though you're virtual. I wonder if there's going to be something like that with education, where, I don't know how to say it, but like there's a professor, perhaps even like holographic or VR, that the students can learn from and interact with, that may be across the globe from them, but that is a real great educator and almost an expert in that field. And that's pretty cool, because it's starting to, as long as, you know, we make technology accessible, which there's been a big movement of that, you know, the access to hotspots, the access to Wi-Fi, all of that has improved. It's about time that needed to improve. That's a big equalizer. But not only that, I think the educational equity is going to improve, because a lot of what we see is students, especially in low-income communities, having lower quality education. And if they're able to access this higher quality, and not only that, know and experience things outside of their community, I think that that can be really cool. And again, I leave it to people who are in that world and who can innovate and create, but I think that we could definitely move in that direction. The tutoring itself, we've been online personally. Our company's been online using Zoom for like 6 years. But getting clients to agree to online has always been challenging for me. Parents thought, there's no way it's going to be effective online. And I'm like, it's totally effective. Now the parents are having these Zoom meetings all the time, or, you know, Google Meets or whatever it is. And they're like, oh, okay, it is effective. So the ability of me being able to reach students that are normally, again, limited geographically, or even match a tutor who I know is so good with this student, and oh, it would be so perfect, but this one's in Texas, this one's in Illinois, how can I put them together? I can do that now. That in itself has been really, you know, magical to see that, again, we're not limited geographically anymore. And I think that that's going to continue.
I think you hit on a really good point there, Lindsey. Virtual classrooms. Well, I mean, you have things like Second Life, and there was a movie out a few years ago called Ready Player One, where people lived in a virtual world most of the time. And I'm guessing if you can make that as real as possible, then that could be a brilliant future. Like you say, if you've got a tutor who's in Illinois, really good at one particular subject, you've got students all around the United States, if not around the world, you could picture like an auditorium in the virtual world with the instructor, the lecturer down at the bottom here, with all the slides behind her, and then the students in like a tiered system, just like it would be in a university or a college.
And not to say that that replaces real human interaction. There's definitely still value for that. But kind of like we were saying with the homeschooling, you know, that's not just sit with your kids at home. They still have the community for other things. And so, you know, if we have that VR for the schooling at home, but then still go out and do sports and go to museums and have activities, I think that could provide a really good balance of, you know, equitable education, but also still real life experiences, both of which are very meaningful.
It's going to be interesting to see, because we've been talking about kind of like the tech side of distributing education. But one thing we haven't really covered is kind of like the syllabuses and what we actually teach. You've mentioned resilience a few times. it would be wonderful if this event, this pandemic, actually got educators to sit down around the world and actually look at what we're teaching students nowadays. Do we need to be looking at teaching things like resilience and tech skills to everybody, not just the tech able, but people that will need to learn how to type? I mean, back in the 50s and 60s, you had typing schools where people, mainly women, would go and they would learn to type really, really fast. Now you think, well, why would anybody want to learn that now? But we all spend our time in front of these things, you know, with keyboards. So if you can type at a reasonable speed, you can get your thoughts out of your head and onto paper, and it just helps the whole process along. So I think it would be wonderful if educators take this kind of opportunity and think of, okay, the Industrial Revolution has kind of gone and is history now. We need to review what students actually need to take them forward into the future to be independent, resilient people.
You bring up some really good points, and I'm not sure if a lot of people are aware of that idea that when our schools were first forming, moving from the at-home schooling or the one-room schoolhouse, it was during the Industrial Revolution. And what was the point of the Industrial Revolution is to have people on an assembly line doing the same thing over and over, which is really how we shaped our schools. That's not our society today. Today, we need innovators. We need creative thinkers. We need problem solvers. We need leaders. And that's really what society is looking for to be able to progress forward. And while a lot of other countries have modified their schooling accordingly, for the large part, most of the public schooling, especially in the United States, has not. And that's part of why we're still, I think, as a country, outsourcing a lot of our work, unfortunately. So I can say personally, I started my tutoring business 10 years ago. And while it is tutoring, I have a component of it that really focuses on the social and the emotional side and really focuses on these soft skills. I've never really said that. I've always said underlying learning and life skills because I found kind of an adverse reaction if I went into too much more. This is the first year in a decade where I've had people embrace that actually, who want to hear metacognition, executive functions, interpersonal skills, empathy. They want to hear these things. They're even asking for it by name. And I think that's great. And not only that, I've seen an influx in educators coming together to talk about what they call SEL, which is social emotional learning, and how to actually intertwine that into their curriculum. Because a lot of our education in elementary school, we have separate curriculum for SEL. But then once the kids get to middle, high school and beyond, we kind of back off and just think they're going to figure it out. But it's almost like they might even need it more at that age. And honestly, there's a lot of adults who need it. And so I've definitely seen increase in the attention put on how do we intertwine mindset with learning. It's not just about rote memorization anymore. And how do we, for example, inspire a growth mindset in our learners while also teaching calculus and civics? And it's totally doable. I do it in my business. I train my tutors in it. I've actually also been leading workshops for other educators on a lot of it's just shifting the way you talk to them, the experiences you provide to them, but you can intertwine it into your curriculum quite easily. And I can say as an educator who's been doing this for years and then now experiencing it this year, there's definitely a shift. And it's, again, exciting because it's about time. How can you address test scores without testing anxiety? How can you address someone's grades without also talking about their goal setting abilities? It's just, they're totally intertwined. And if we're as educators only looking at scores and grades and not looking at the underlying things that are affecting their scores and grades, what we're doing instead is labeling kids as lazy or unmotivated or incapable, but they're not. It's actually something else that's very easy to fix, and then the grades and scores follow. One of the things I learned as a teacher is the less I focus on grades and the curriculum, the more they learn. the more I focus on making learning fun and creating an environment of understanding and empathy, the more they learn. And so, their scores were skyrocketing. I see that with my students too. So I think there's definitely been a shift, and you hit it on the head.
You just made a really, really good point that made me smile, Lindsey. Making education fun. I mean, that was anything but that when I was a kid at school. And it's so strange because we know from our own personal experience that when anything is fun, we enjoy it, we do it more, we want to do it more, we want to learn about it more. Whereas it's kind of like, okay, we've got to go to school, we've got to teach our kids this, that, and the other, whether they like it or not. So go to school and learn. And that is completely the wrong approach. We talked about SEL. That, in a way, in a sense, that should be the primary thing we teach. And all the other stuff like calculus and geography and sciences should be kind of ancillary and almost like bolt-ons as required. Because that's how, we are social animals. And that's how we're going to kind of grow and develop and build this shrinking community, because the world is getting smaller. The better the tech gets, the smaller the world becomes. But unfortunately, the world is getting smaller, but the prejudices and the fear and the hatred isn't being addressed because we don't teach SEL. We don't teach it as a priority, like you said, and the kids that really need it don't get it.
And we're not going to progress as a society by memorizing math equations. It's just not going to happen. There has to be more to it for sure. I always say it's a two-prong, maybe even three. We work to have our students become competent and conscious leaders. So the competency is showing that you understand subject matter, because there are certain things that we do want our children to be able to do. We want them to articulate themselves. We want them to be able to write. We want them to be able to problem solve. There are certain competencies that they need and that they do get in school. But the consciousness is the part that we're neglecting. And what ends up happening is a lot of people get to leadership positions because of their competencies, but then they don't have the consciousness. And then they have people they're leading. And when I say leader, you can be a leader in your home. You could be a leader in your neighborhood. I mean, everyone's a leader in some way. And if we're not arming our students to be competent and conscious leaders, then we're really halting our progress as a society.
I couldn't agree more. And, like rote memorization has been proven time and time again to, yes, it will get you through an exam, but once you've got through that exam, you forget it all and you don't absorb that information. So it becomes almost like useless to you in the future, which is such a shame because you spent all of that time learning this stuff and then you're not able to put it into practice. I mean,
you got an A on the test, but so what?
Yeah. I mean, like calculus, how many people who need to use or would benefit from using calculus can actually use calculus without actually having to take additional training because they learned it 5, 10, 15 years ago for the test, passed the test, got an A or a B or whatever, and then it just like evaporated.
It's true. It's funny. I had a student one time was doing calculus and he was like, who uses this in their career? And I was like, me? And I'm basically the only one. But what I do, and this really does help students with motivation too, is I always go back to the why. Why are we being asked to learn this? Because the kids are wise about this. They're catching on that, hang on, I don't need this in life. Why am I being taught this? So to get them to buy in, because the systemic changes are not going to happen immediately. And I need them to get through this now and to see the bigger picture, honestly. I really focus in on the why of we're learning problem solving skills. There's a problem in front of you. You have a bunch of tools of how to approach it. What's the most effective way to do it? That is a skill for life. The skill of completing a task, even a task you don't want to do, that's a skill for life. Even as a business owner in an industry that I am so insanely passionate about and I love my job, there are things I don't want to do. I did my taxes last night. It sucked. I don't want to do it, but I have to do it. And the feeling of finishing it and submitting it is part of what we get through the school process of getting things done. even the idea of, and I hate to say it, but sometimes we're in jobs where we're doing things that don't really make sense, or a boss that we don't really enjoy. And we just kind of have to make it work. And not to say that, I always try to distinguish for people the difference between struggle and suffering. Not to say that anyone should suffer. I don't want to ever put kids in a position where you're suffering, deal with it. That's not what I'm saying. But struggle, that's good. You know, how can I get through the struggle? How can I deal with this assignment that I don't like, or this teacher that I'm not really connecting with? That's okay. Because really, you just kind of have to get through things sometimes. And there is value to be gained from whatever you're doing if you shift your perspective a little bit.
I mean, that's what you're saying there is about resilience and making kids more resilient, making people understand that, yes, there are some things that none of us like doing, but we have to do, like, you know, putting the trash out of a weekend or whatever. It's got to be done. It's not the most pleasant job. Nobody's going to raise their hand, but it still has to be done.
And you feel good doing it. You know, even doing the dishes. I mean, you feel good that it's been done. If it wasn't done, you would not feel good about it.
Yeah,
right.
that I was going to say.
So that's kind of what I mean. Yeah. The act of doing it is not fun. But even like last night I did dishes. I walked in this morning and all the dishes are dry, and the kitchen looks clean. And it's just like, you know, it wasn't my most favorite thing I ever did in my life, but I'm glad I did it, because if I had woke up and the kitchen was a mess, I would have had a different feeling.
Yeah, that's the big lesson, isn't it? It's some things we don't want to do, but we do them because once it's done, it feels better. And the kitchen analogy is brilliant. Nobody wants to do the dishes. Nobody wants to tidy the kitchen. But when you wake up in the morning, the last thing anybody wants is to walk into a kitchen and go, oh, no, I've got to spend half an hour sorting this place out before I can even start the day.
Totally. I completely agree.
So, Lindsey, apart from teaching millions of tutors and tutoring students, what are you up to right now?
Oh, I mean, I'm bunkered in my house for sure. I am dreaming of the day I can get back outside. I'm very much an outdoorsy person, even though I am in a city now. Get me in the mountains, get me off the grid. I do have a camping trip planned in February, and I'm very excited about that because listening to my body and listening to myself, I'm definitely hitting a point where I need to unplug and just recenter and refocus. But other than that, I'm doing a lot of reading. I always read. That's a good escape for me, whether it is something that is, you know, educational and informative, or literally just, you know, a fictional novel to just kind of go away somewhere. Reading has been a good escape for me. Listening to a lot of podcasts is always good. I always feel like I learned something from them, and it's kind of like, yes, I got something done today. I love to listen to podcasts when I'm exercising, or when I'm cooking, or when I'm cleaning the kitchen late at night, because it just feels like you're kind of accomplishing something. But those are the things that are really getting me through right now in this time of isolation.
I wish I could go on a camping trip. We are locked in and not allowed out at the moment, and hopefully that will end at some stage. Tell me, Lindsey, how does worldwide tutoring work? Do you sell packages? Do you do one-off? What's the process? If somebody's interested in or considering bringing in a tutor to help their child or children, what's the kind of process?
So the whole premise of my company is to get students off of tutoring. So I don't do packages, although we do have discounted packages just because it takes a clerical off my end, but anything that's not used, I refund 100%. So it's not like anyone's locked in, because it kind of goes against my values of we're adjusting this personally for each student. And after 2 months of tutoring, if the student says, I'm good, I want to try it on my own, I'm not going to say, no, you're locked in for 3 more months. It just doesn't make sense. So we really take things, you know, week by week, month by month. There are some parents who say, I want someone for the whole school year. We're there. There are some that say, I just want a couple of weeks. We're there for that. Even especially in times now when things are so unpredictable and uncertain, we're very flexible. You know, we have learning pods, and we take that week by week, because who knows when schools are going to open. For instance, CPS is talking about opening in February, but then that's Chicago public school system. But then the teachers are striking, so everyone's in this limbo, and I'm like, don't worry about it. You know, we're here if you need us. If not, it's okay. So what I get is that as a consequence of that is a lot of families who come and go. So they'll come for a certain situation in their life. Maybe their child is starting middle school. We'll help kind of get them started, and then they try it on their own. Then they'll come back in high school and then do it on their own. Then they'll come back for a tough class and do it on their own. So the process is very simple. I try to make it as painless as possible in terms of giving you one tutor that can help with anything you need, even one tutor that can help with multiple children needing multiple help with different subjects or having their own needs, and really make it personalized for the families and the kids.
And you mentioned earlier that you work internationally. Now, just to clarify, does that mean you're working with American students internationally, or can you work with kind of a student in London following a British style syllabus?
So it's a really weird time right now. This idea of providing services online is definitely a novel concept that I know the government one day, just like they did with Amazon, they're going to catch on and be like, okay, how do we tax this?
Exactly.
Right. So right now, what I've done to kind of stay legal is I have tutors in the 2 states that I'm registered in, which are Illinois and Texas, yet I'm allowed to work with students anywhere in the world. So my tutors in Illinois and Texas are working with students I actually have a student in London. I have a student in Poland. I have students in Puerto Rico. I have one in Monteverde. They're kind of all over. And so, but it is my Illinois and Texas tutors that are working with them.
Okay, cool. And how do people get hold of you?
Our website is a great place to start. So it's worldwise with an S, tutoring.com. That's where you'll see information about all our services as well as how to find a tutor. But there's also a lot of information on there for educators and parents of how do I teach children of different levels? How do I get my child motivated? So there's a lot of resources there as well that I encourage people to check out. Plus we're online, on social media. So Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, even Twitter.
Oh, wow.
And I'm giving learning tips. Oh yeah, constant learning tips, because I've really seen a need for that, with the pandemic, is how can I help, and giving a lot of free resources and events and tips.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, it's world-wise, not worldwide. We were talking about this before we came on air, how people kind of see a word and then automatically assume it's this word rather than worldwide. So obviously wise as in learning and tutoring and everything else. So it's a great name.
Thank you. And then the side note I have is I do have a nonprofit. So if there is anyone that's wanting tutoring that doesn't have the economics for it, I have a nonprofit called Educate, Radiate, Elevate. The website's educateradiateelevate.org, or if that's annoying, you could do eretutoring.org. It'll go to the same place. And that's for our low-income students of color. And again, just our main goal with that is bridging that achievement gap and giving equitable education.
Cool. So just to finish off, I was going to ask you a kind of a standard question, but if you could go back in time, would you change anything? But after this conversation, I think the answer is definitely going to be no.
True. I don't really live with regrets. I just am always excited for what the next thing is.
Okay, so let's go with another question, which I just dreamed up. What is, 2 parts, the best piece of business advice you've ever been given, and conversely, the worst piece of business advice you've ever been given? Great
question. The best piece of business advice is to network, and I hate that word network, but I don't know another way to say it, with people outside of your industry. And I can't even tell you the insight that I've gained from people who really have nothing to do with education, but who are just very heart-centered, mindful business owners who have really aligned with my underlying values and who have given me amazing advice. So, branching outside of your industry and reaching people who you connect with at a different level, and being vulnerable with them and asking for help is definitely a good tip. The worst advice I was given, I've had a lot of people tell me this, that I offer too many services, that I need to focus on just ACT prep or just math lessons. And I'm like, no, that's my premise of my business is we're here to help with whatever you need. And I actually think that brings more clients to us, knowing that we're a one-stop shop for all 5 of your kids. And I have families with 5 kids that have all been through our program. It's just nice for them to know they have a support no matter what. not that they have to go do a different thing for everything. And the fact that we do academics and the mindset is also really helpful. So people say narrow in your niche. I think my niche is that I'm not narrow. So, and I'm not going to change that.
Well, that's it, absolutely. One size doesn't fit all. So maybe in some niche right down. But from what we've been chatting about this afternoon, your business is education, and education is as broad as it is long. So why the heck not?
Agreed.
Listen, Lindsey, it's been a fascinating and really interesting conversation today. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on today because I know you've been really mega busy.
Yeah, no, I love talking about this. So thank you so much for having me on so I can share.
I will speak to you soon. Have a lovely weekend.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye.